The colony ship Perseverance died screaming through an alien sky. Metal shrieked against atmosphere as the navigation systems failed completely. Inside, 3,000 people woke from sleep to alarms and the horrible sound of their ship tearing itself apart. Commander fought her way to the bridge through smoke and failing gravity. The AI's voice was calm despite the chaos, reporting that they were crashing on an uncharted world. Class XII, it said, the highest danger rating in the galactic catalog. Barely had time to strap into the command chair before impact. The ship hit ground at an angle that should have killed everyone aboard. Instead, it carved a trench 3 kilometers long through purple jungle before finally stopping. When opened her eyes, half her crew was dead. The other half was screaming. They stumbled out of the wreckage into hell. The air burned their throats with every breath. Gravity pulled at them like chains, making every step an effort. The sky above was a sickly green, and 2 suns blazed down with heat that made their emergency suits feel like ovens. Around them, the jungle moved with life. Big life. Dangerous life. The first attack came within an hour. Creatures the size of bears but built like wolves, with 6 legs and mouths full of teeth that dripped acid. They killed 5 people before the security team managed to bring them down with pulse rifles. When the creatures died, their blood ate through the metal deck plating of the crashed ship, stared at the smoking holes and understood. This planet wanted them dead. She gathered her people in the least damaged section of the ship, 3,000 souls looking at her with desperate eyes. The FTL drive was slag. The communication array was gone. No one was coming to save them. Earth was 200 light-years away, and they were stranded on a world that killed for sport. "We have 2 choices," told them. "Die here or make this place ours." The first weeks were a nightmare. People died every day. The insects alone were deadly, swarming in clouds that stripped flesh from bone in minutes. The plants released spores that paralyzed the nervous system. At night, the temperature dropped below freezing, and things came out of the jungle that hunted by the heat of living bodies. Every 3 days, like clockwork, storms rolled across the landscape with winds strong enough to pick up a grown man and throw him into the trees. But humans were stubborn. They learned fast when survival depended on it. Engineers turned the ship's wreckage into a fortress, welding hull plates into walls and mounting the remaining weapons on towers. Biologists studied the local life with desperate intensity, learning what could kill them and how to kill it first. They discovered the spore plants could be burned to create a barrier the insects wouldn't cross. The acid blood predators, they learned, were territorial. Kill the alpha, and the pack would flee. Dr. James made the breakthrough that changed everything. He was a thin man with shaking hands, but his mind worked like a machine. He took samples from the creatures they killed and from the plants they cleared. After 2 weeks in his makeshift lab, he came to with a solution in a glass vial. "The toxins," he said, his eyes bright with exhaustion. "We can use them, extract them, concentrate them, coat our weapons. What this planet uses to kill us, we turn back on it." They did. Spears and blades coated in concentrated poison that dropped the predators in seconds. Grenades filled with paralytic spores. Traps baited with local meat and lined with acid collected from the creature's blood. The fortress stopped being a place where they hid and became a place they struck from. 6 months after the crash, they had a settlement. Fields where they grew earth crops in soil they had to detoxify. Pens where they kept captured herbivores for meat. Patrols that hunted the jungle instead of hiding from it. The population was down to 2,500, but those who remained were harder than steel. Their bodies had adapted to the gravity. Their lungs had adjusted to the toxic air. Every single one of them had killed something that tried to eat them. That was when the aliens found them. The ship appeared in the sky without warning, sleek and silver against the green. It circled the settlement 3 times before landing just outside the walls. Watched it through binoculars, her hand on her sidearm. The hatch opened, and creatures emerged that looked like they were made of water and glass. 4 arms each, bodies that seemed to flow rather than walk. They approached the gate slowly, weapons holstered. The lead alien introduced himself as Captain X of the trade vessel Gentle Current. He spoke through a translator device in careful, formal tones. His crew had detected the crash site months ago, but assumed it was a grave. No species survived on Class XII worlds. They had come to salvage and document the tragedy. "But you live," X said, his voice full of wonder and horror. "You live and build on Apex." Apex asked, "What we call this world, the peak of lethality, how do you survive?" Smiled, it was not a kind expression. "We adapt." She gave X a tour, showed him the farms where they grew food in soil that would poison in minutes, the training grounds where her people sparred in the crushing gravity, the kennels where they kept captured predators, teaching them to attack on command. With every new sight, X's skin became more translucent with what recognized as fear. "This is not survival," he said finally. "This is conquest. You have made war on a planet." "Yes," agreed, "and we're winning." X offered rescue. His ship could take 1,000 people back to civilized space, refused without hesitation. They had paid for this ground in blood. She would not abandon it now, would not lead her people back to Earth as refugees with nothing but trauma and empty hands. Instead, she made a different offer. "You want something from Apex," she said. "The minerals here are rare. The biological compounds are unique, but no species except humans can harvest them. So here's the deal. You bring us supplies, technology, genetic databases and embryos to expand our population. In return, you get exclusive trading rights to everything we pull from this world." X considered. His species were traders at heart, and he saw the profit in humanity's madness. He agreed. The partnership was sealed with a contract that would change the sector's economy. Over the next months, ships came regularly. They brought equipment, seeds, animals, and most precious of all, the means to grow their population faster. Medical technology that let them accelerate pregnancy and development safely. Cloning facilities that could create new life from stored genetic material. Put it all to work immediately. The settlement expanded. The population began to grow. The aliens watched with fascination and fear. Reports spread through the trade networks. Humans on Apex were not just surviving but thriving. They were having children on a world that should make that impossible. Those children were born in high gravity and toxic air. They would be stronger than their parents, faster, tougher. One evening stood on the wall of their fortress and looked out over their expanding territory. Fields stretched in neat rows. Buildings made from local stone and ship metal rose against the jungle. Patrols moved in disciplined units through the cleared zones. In the distance, she could hear the roar of predators, but they stayed away from the lights now. They had learned. X joined her, his form shimmering in the setting suns. "You have done the impossible," he said quietly. "But at what cost? I see the scars on your people, the hardness in their eyes. This world has changed you." "Yes," said simply, "it has made us stronger." "Perhaps," X said, "but I wonder if you realize what you are becoming. We have a saying among my people, that which survives the worst becomes the worst to survive." Turned to look at him fully. "Is that a threat?" "An observation. You have 3,000 people now, soon 5,000, then 10. You are breeding warriors on a battlefield. What happens when Apex is not enough? When you look to the stars and see worlds softer than this one?" Smiled again, and this time there was something predatory in it. "Then those worlds had better hope we come as friends." X left the next day. His ship carried minerals and biological samples worth a fortune. In his report to the Trade Council, he noted that humanity's settlement on Apex should be monitored closely. They were a species that had turned disadvantage into advantage, weakness into strength. They called their settlement the Dominion, he wrote, and perhaps that name was more accurate than they intended. Read a copy of his report and laughed. The Dominion. Yes, that fit. They had survived what should have killed them. They had conquered a world that fought back. And this was just the beginning. She held a data pad showing population projections. In 5 years, they would have 10,000 people. In 10, 50,000, all of them raised on Apex. All of them forged by this world's cruelty into something harder than any species the galaxy had seen before. The planet that should have been their grave was becoming their greatest weapon. Every child born here was born stronger. Every generation adapted better. They were not just surviving anymore. They were evolving. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. 20 years passed, and Apex became a legend. The Dominion grew from a desperate settlement into a power that made the sector's established species nervous. The population exploded to 200,000 through aggressive expansion and the steady flow of colonists from Earth. These were not the desperate refugees of the first crash. These were volunteers, people who heard about Apex and chose the hard path because they knew it would make them more than they were. The planet still tried to kill them daily. The storms still came. The predators still hunted. But now humans hunted back. They rode the six-legged thunderbeasts as cavalry, creatures the size of elephants that could cross rough terrain at devastating speed. They bred the acid-blood predators as war hounds, selectively creating loyal breeds that obeyed commands and attacked on sight. Children trained from age 5 in survival skills that would horrify softer species. By age 10, every Dominion child could track, hunt, fight, and kill. Director, her hair gray but her spine still steel, watched her empire grow. The Dominion controlled 40% of Apex's habitable zones, a term that meant something very different here than on gentle worlds. They had cities built into cliff faces and valleys, mines that dug deep into the planet's rich core, factories that processed materials no other species could safely handle. And most importantly, they had something every other species wanted: soldiers. The request came from the hegemony, a mid-tier power locked in a territorial dispute with the Hive Collective. They needed ground troops for a contested jungle moon. Hot, humid, full of venomous wildlife and disease. Their own soldiers needed environment suits and air support just to survive there. They had heard rumors about Apex-trained humans. They wanted to see if the rumors were true. Sent captain with 500 soldiers, was 25 years old and had never known any world but Apex. He was second generation, born in the Dominion, raised in its and trained in its harsh schools. He stood 2 meters tall, his body lean muscle adapted to high gravity. He could run for hours in conditions that would kill a baseline human. He had killed his first predator at age 7. By 20, he had killed hundreds. The commanders watched troops disembark on the jungle moon with barely concealed skepticism. The humans wore light armor and carried simple weapons. No environment suits, no air filters, just soldiers in basic gear, looking around the deadly jungle like it was a park. "You need protective equipment," the commander insisted. "The atmosphere has—" "We know," interrupted. "We've reviewed the data, it's cleaner than home." They did not understand, not then. The first week, troops established forward operating bases in locations the said were impossible to fortify. Dense jungle where their scanners could not penetrate, swamps filled with predators, volcanic regions with toxic gases. The humans did not just survive there. They thrived. They hunted the local predators for food and sport. They used local materials to build shelters. They moved through terrain that would not enter without heavy vehicles. The second week, the Hive attacked. The Hive were insect-like warriors, fierce and numerous. They came in waves of thousands, expecting to overwhelm the human positions through sheer numbers. It should have worked. It had worked against positions dozens of times. It did not work against humans. Soldiers fought with a brutality they had never encountered. They did not hold defensive lines. They counterattacked into the swarms. They used the jungle itself as a weapon, collapsing trees onto Hive warriors and driving them into pits filled with local predators. When the Hive tried to surround them, the humans scattered into the wilderness and picked them off in small groups. When the Hive dug in, the humans came at night, moving silently through darkness that should have been impossible to navigate. The Hive had faced many species. None fought like humans. There was no honor in their tactics, no mercy in their strikes. They fought like the universe itself had personally wronged them and they were getting revenge. After 3 weeks, the Hive warriors began to retreat from sectors they held. After 6 weeks, they abandoned the moon entirely. They were stunned, delivered his report to their high command with simple efficiency. The moon was theirs. Casualties, 43 human soldiers. Hive casualties, estimated 16,000. The commanders looked at the young human captain and saw something that terrified them more than the Hive ever had. They saw a weapon. News of the campaign spread fast through the trade networks and diplomatic channels. More contracts followed. The Dominion was selective, only accepting those that aligned with their interests and paid well. Established the Apex Corps officially, a mercenary organization with standards that would bankrupt most militaries. They wanted the best equipment, the best intelligence, and compensation that reflected what they brought to any battlefield. They got it every time. The Dominion's wealth exploded. They purchased advanced technology from dozens of species. Ships, not just transports but warships, manufacturing facilities, medical technology that pushed the boundaries of what galactic law considered ethical. They used it all to expand faster, grow stronger. The population centers on Apex grew into true cities. They established outposts on 3 of the system's other planets, though none were as harsh as Apex itself. The culture shifted too. The Dominion was no longer just a colony of survivors. It was becoming something else entirely. A meritocracy where strength, intelligence, and survival skills determined rank. Children were raised communally, trained by the best in every skill needed to survive and conquer. There was no room for weakness in the Dominion. Those who could not adapt were given gentler roles, but they would never lead. Leadership belonged to those who had proven themselves in Apex's crucible. They called themselves the Apex-born and they wore it like armor. They were not Earth humans anymore. They were something new, something harder. The original survivors, now gray, and looked at their children and with pride and something like fear. The younger generation did not know softness, did not understand mercy the way the old did. They knew only strength and the right of the strong to take what they could hold. Not everyone in the galaxy welcomed humanity's rise. The hierarchs of an ancient species that had dominated local politics for thousands of years watched the Dominion's expansion with growing alarm. They tried diplomacy first, suggesting the humans were overextending. When that failed, they tried economic pressure, pressuring trade partners to embargo Apex goods. They refused. Their partnership with humanity was too profitable. They had exclusive rights to Apex materials that could not be sourced anywhere else. Chemicals that enhanced FTL drives, biological compounds with medical applications, minerals that were theoretically abundant but practically impossible for anyone but humans to extract from Apex's hostile environment. The hierarchs decided to make an example. They ambushed a trade convoy carrying Apex goods, destroying 3 ships and killing thousands. Captain X, now old and wealthy from decades of human trade, barely escaped. He brought his damaged ship limping into Apex orbit with news of the attack. Convened her council immediately. Around the table sat the original survivors and the Apex-born generation. The contrast was stark. The survivors bore the weight of years and memory. The younger generation looked hungry, eager, sat its right hand, wearing the rank of general now. At 25, he commanded the entire Apex Corps. The hierarchs have declared themselves our enemies, said simply. Responses. Destroy them, said immediately. There were nods around the table from the other Apex-born. They have 200 warships, one of the older counselors pointed out. 40 systems. We have 15 armed merchants and 7 worlds, only 3 of which are developed. Ships are not soldiers, replied. Wars are won on the ground, always have been. The hierarchs do not know what they have provoked, another Apex-born officer added. We should educate them. Listen to the debate. The divide was clear. The survivors urged caution, wanted to try diplomacy first. The Apex-born wanted blood. In the end, sided with her children. Not because she wanted war, but because she understood something the survivors sometimes forgot. The galaxy only respected strength. Show weakness now, and every species would think the Dominion could be pushed. We respond, she decided. Not with words, with action. Make them understand what Apex-born means. Smiled, it was not a pleasant expression. Yes, Director. The plan was simple and insane. The hierarchs expected a naval response, maybe attacks on their trade routes. They got neither. Instead, 2 weeks after the council meeting, led 2,000 Apex Corps soldiers on a direct assault of VII, a fortress world that guarded the hierarchs' outer territories. The planet was considered impregnable. Orbital defense platforms, a garrison of 50,000 hierarch warriors, shields that could stop any conventional attack. The hierarchs watched the human ships approach and prepared to demonstrate why challenging ancient powers was foolish. The humans did not attack the orbital defenses. Instead, they launched drop pods directly at the planet's surface, hardened containers that burned through atmosphere and punched through the planetary shield by sheer kinetic force. It was a maneuver that killed 200 soldiers on impact. The rest scattered across the planet's southern continent, a volcanic region the hierarchs considered uninhabitable. For 2 weeks nothing happened. The hierarchs searched the volcanic wastes with scanners and drones but found nothing. They assumed the humans had died in the harsh environment. They were wrong. The attacks began on the 15th day. A supply convoy ambushed in a mountain pass, every vehicle destroyed, every soldier dead. An outpost overrun in the night, the garrison slaughtered before they could call for help. Fortress walls scaled by soldiers who climbed sheer cliffs the hierarchs thought were impossible barriers. The humans were not fighting a conventional war. They were fighting the way they had learned on Apex, turning the environment into a weapon and disappearing into terrain no one else could survive. The hierarch garrison began to crack. They were trained soldiers, professional warriors, but they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that could move through volcanic wastelands without equipment, that could survive temperatures that would cook other species, that struck without warning and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The humans fought like demons, like nightmares made flesh. When the hierarchs sent their elite guard, lured them into the volcanic badlands and collapsed a lava tube on them, hundreds of the best hierarch warriors died screaming, buried in molten rock. The psychological impact was devastating. The garrison on VII, 50,000 strong, began to crumble. In 6 weeks it was over. The hierarch commander surrendered to personally, handing over his weapon in a ceremony that broadcast across the sector. The message was clear. The Dominion was not a minor power to be bullied. They were a threat, a real one. The humans did not occupy VII. They did not need to. They had proven their point, and his soldiers left the planet as quickly as they had arrived, taking with them captured technology and a reputation that would reshape sector politics. Back on Apex, watched the footage of the surrender ceremony. She felt pride and unease in equal measure. They had won, but at what cost? She looked its face on the screen and saw no doubt there, no hesitation. He had done what needed to be done, and he would do it again without question. X visited her that evening. The old moved slowly now, his body showing the weight of years. "You have changed the sector," he said. "The hierarchs are suing for peace. Others are requesting alliances. The Dominion is no longer a curiosity. You are a power." "That was always the plan," said. "Was it?" X asked. "I remember a frightened woman on a crashed ship trying to save her people. Now I see an empire built on strength. Your soldiers are feared across civilized space. Is this what you wanted?" Was quiet for a long moment. "I wanted my people to survive," she said finally. "Everything else came from that." "Perhaps," X said, "but survival and conquest are not the same thing. What happens when Apex is not enough? When your Apex-born look at the stars and see soft worlds full of weak species?" "Then those species had better be our friends," said, "or learn to be stronger." X left without another word, stood alone in her office, looking out over the city. In the distance, she could see the training grounds where children sparred in the gravity and heat. The next generation, already harder than she had been, already seeing the galaxy as something to be taken rather than joined. She had saved her people, but what had she turned them into? The question haunted for the next 10 years, even as the Dominion grew beyond anything she had imagined. The population swelled to 5 million across 7 worlds. The Apex Corps became the most sought-after military force in the sector, hired by governments and corporations for operations no one else could handle. The wealth flowing into the Dominion funded expansion on a massive scale. Cities rose on hostile worlds. Fleets patrolled Dominion space. And the Apex-born generation took leadership positions across every level of government and military. Was promoted to Supreme Commander of all Dominion forces at age 30. He sat on the council as the youngest member in its history. When he spoke, people listened because represented the future of humanity. Strong, confident, unburdened by the trauma of the first crash. He had been born in power and raised to wield it. But not everyone agreed with the direction the Dominion was taking. A faction emerged among the original survivors and even some second generation who felt the Dominion had lost its way. Dr. Sarah's younger sister led them. She was brilliant like her brother but different in temperament. Where saw the galaxy as a place to conquer, Sarah saw it as a place to understand. "We have become what we feared," Sarah argued in council meetings. "We export violence. Our entire economy is built on being the sector's attack dogs. Is this what we survived for, to become mercenaries?" "We survived to be strong," countered. "Everything else is luxury. Strength gives us choices. Weakness gives us graves." The debate divided the Dominion. Some agreed with Sarah, arguing they should focus on science, trade, and diplomacy. Others sided with, pointing out that their strength was the only reason they had survived long enough to have this debate. The tension grew as years passed, becoming a fundamental question about Dominion identity. Now in her 70s and struggling with the effects of decades on Apex, watched her people fracture. She had been director for 30 years, guiding the Dominion from desperate refugees to galactic power. But she was tired. The weight of all those decisions, all those dead, pressed on her. She knew her time was ending. The crisis that forced her decision came from an unexpected direction. Earth, humanity's overcrowded, struggling, requested Dominion aid. A plague had broken out in the Asian coalition, something that Earth's medical facilities could not handle. They needed advanced medicine, the kind the Dominion had purchased with their mercenary wealth. They were asking their children for help. The council split immediately, argued they should refuse. Earth had abandoned them, declared the Perseverance colonists dead, and moved on. The Dominion owed them nothing. Sarah argued they should help. These were still humans, still family, regardless of politics. "We should do more than help," Sarah said. "We should offer them the chance to join us. Earth is dying slowly. 11 billion people on a world that can barely support 8. Let them come to Apex, to our other worlds. We have room, we have resources." "And dilute what makes us strong," shot back. "Earth humans are soft, they have not been forged by hardship. Bringing them here would weaken us. Or remind us that strength without compassion is just cruelty," Sarah replied. The argument raged for hours. Other counselors took sides. Some saw Sarah's point that the Dominion was becoming too hard, too focused on military might. Others agreed with that their edge came from their harsh culture, and compromising it would destroy them. Finally raised her hand for silence. The room fell quiet immediately. She was old, sick, and everyone knew she was making her last major decision as director. "We help Earth," she said, "and we offer the great recruitment. Any human who wants to come to Dominion space can apply. We will test them, train them, and those who can adapt will be welcomed. Those who cannot will be helped to settle on gentler worlds under Dominion protection." That could be millions of people, protested. Tens of millions. Yes, agreed. And most will fail, but some will succeed and they will bring diversity of thought we have lost. We have become so focused on surviving that we have forgotten to live. Sarah is right. We need balance. Looked like he wanted to argue, but held his tongue. He respected too much to challenge her final decision. The great recruitment began within months. Ships traveled to Earth carrying medicine and an offer. Come to the Dominion, be tested, be forged, become something more. The response was overwhelming. 30 million people applied in the first year alone. They came from every nation, every background. Most were desperate, fleeing Earth's overcrowding and ecological collapse. Some were curious, drawn by stories of human worlds where strength determined worth. The testing was brutal. Applicants were brought to Apex and put through trials that mimicked what the original survivors had faced. Most failed within days. The gravity alone broke many. The heat, the toxic air, the constant danger. Of the first million tested, only 50,000 made it through. But those 50,000 were transformed. They arrived as Earth humans and left as something closer to Apex-born. The influx changed the Dominion. New ideas came with new people. Scientists who had studied on Earth, engineers with different training, artists and teachers and philosophers. The Dominion's culture began to shift, becoming less purely martial and more complex. There was resistance from the Apex-born purists, but even had to admit the newcomers who survived the testing proved their worth. Then came the challenge that would test everything the Dominion had become. The sovereignty, a major power with thousands of worlds, made a proposal. They wanted to hire the Apex Corps for a campaign against the Empire, another major power. The contract was huge, the largest in Dominion history. It would bring wealth beyond imagination and cement the Dominion as a military superpower. There was one problem. Intelligence reports suggested the Empire was actually the victim in this conflict. They had been expanding aggressively, and they were defending their territory. Taking the contract meant becoming the aggressors in a war of conquest. The council split again, argued they should take it. The Dominion did not judge their employers' morals. They provided a service. Getting involved in galactic politics beyond their interests was foolish. Sarah argued they should refuse. The Dominion's reputation mattered. If they became known as weapons for hire regardless of cause, they would lose the moral authority that made them more than just another military power. We are supposed to be better, Sarah insisted. We survived impossible odds. We built an empire from nothing. Does that give us the right to help destroy others who are just trying to survive? It gives us the right to do whatever keeps us strong, replied. Morality is a luxury of the powerful. We are powerful because we do not let sentiment cloud our judgment. Listen to them argue. This was the fundamental question of Dominion identity. Were they survivors who had become strong or conquerors who wore survival as an excuse? She thought about the crash, about those first terrible days, about every person who had died so others could live. What would they think of what the Dominion had become? We refuse the contract, she announced. The decision sent shock through the council, looked betrayed. The military faction looked angry, but continued. We are strong enough now to choose our battles. We will only fight for causes we believe in or for our own interests. The Dominion is not a weapon for rent. We are a nation and nations have principles. The decision was controversial. Some praised it as proof the Dominion had not lost its humanity. Others condemned it as weakness that would cost them economically and politically. The sovereignty was offended, threatening economic retaliation, but held firm. She knew it was her last major act. The cancer that had been growing in her lungs, a result of breathing Apex's toxic air for 3 decades, was winning. She had months left, maybe less. It was time to choose her successor. The obvious choice was, he was strong, experienced, respected by the military and the Apex-born majority. He would keep the Dominion powerful and feared, but looked at him and saw a man who had forgotten why they fought. saw the galaxy as something to dominate. He had never known weakness, never experienced the terror of being helpless that had driven the original survivors. Sarah was different. She was brilliant but had also struggled. She had nearly died from predator wounds as a teenager, had watched friends fail the trials and leave Apex. She knew both strength and weakness, victory and loss. She understood that power without wisdom was just another form of failure. Made her decision. She called a final council meeting, her body frail but her voice still strong. "I am stepping down," she announced. "The Dominion needs new leadership for its future. Dr. Sarah will succeed me as director." The room erupted, stood so fast his chair fell. "This is wrong. Sarah is capable, but she does not have the strength to lead. The Dominion needs a warrior." "The Dominion needs a thinker," replied. "We have plenty of warriors, you chief among them, but wars are not won only by strength. They are won by knowing when to fight and when to find another way. Sarah understands that." "I can learn," began. "You could," interrupted, "but you will not. You believe strength is the only answer because it is the only answer you have needed. Sarah knows there are other ways. That makes her the better leader." The vote was close. The military faction and Apex-born purists supported, the scientists, the newcomers from Earth, and surprisingly many of the original survivors supported Sarah. In the end, Sarah won by a narrow margin. She was sworn in as director within the week. Took the loss hard but professionally. He remained supreme commander, though the relationship between military and civilian leadership was now strained. Sarah's first acts as director made clear the new direction. She reduced Apex core contracts by 30%, focusing only on defensive operations and causes the Dominion deemed just. She increased funding for scientific research and education. She established formal diplomatic relations with a dozen species, building alliances based on mutual interest rather than fear. The changes were not universally popular. Economic growth slowed. The military grumbled about being held back. But slowly, the Dominion began to develop a reputation for more than just military power. They became known as innovators, as fierce defenders of their allies, as a species that had earned their strength rather than inherited it. Died 6 months after stepping down. She passed quietly in her sleep, her body finally giving out after decades of pushing beyond human limits. The funeral was attended by thousands, humans from across the Dominion. Aliens who had traded with her, fought alongside her, learned from her. X came, ancient now, barely able to stand. He spoke at the service. "Crashed on the worst planet imaginable," he said. "She could have despaired, could have accepted death. Instead, she looked at hell and decided to make it home. She saved her people not by finding an easier path but by teaching them to walk the hard one. The galaxy is better because she lived, and all of us are lesser for her passing." Sarah stood over her mother's grave as the sun set on Apex. Around her, the city glowed with lights. In the distance, thunder beasts called to each other, and predators stalked through the jungle. But here, in the heart of the Dominion, humans lived and thrived despite everything this world could throw at them. Joined her at the graveside. They had barely spoken since her appointment. "She made the wrong choice," he said quietly. "You are good, Sarah, but the Dominion needs strength." "We have strength," Sarah replied. "We always will. Apex will make sure of that. Every generation born here will be warriors because that is what survival requires. But we need to be more than just strong. We need to know what we are being strong for." "And what is that?" asked. Sarah looked at the city, at the lights pushing back the darkness. "To prove that surviving the worst does not mean becoming the worst. To show the galaxy that strength and compassion can coexist. To be the people Mom would have been proud of." Was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "Then I will help you, not because I agree with everything, but because she chose you and I owe her that much."